I was 28 when I met Emma, and by 31, I thought she was the person I'd spend the rest of my life with. She was funny, confident, and had a way of making me feel like I could take on anything. My mom loved her too, or at least, I thought she did. Looking back now, I wonder if Mom saw something in Emma that I was too blinded by love to notice. Mom passed away about 8 months ago in a car accident, and I was still trying to figure out how to move forward without her. She was the kind of person who could make anyone feel welcome. She'd invite neighbors over for dinner on a whim, always have time to listen when someone needed to vent, and somehow manage to balance all of that with being the best mom I could have asked for. Emma knew how much my mom meant to me. She also knew how much my mom had done for her family. When Emma's parents were struggling financially a few years back, my mom co-signed a loan for them to renovate their home. I didn't even know about it until after it was done. Mom never wanted credit for her kindness. She just said, "Family is about helping each other, Jake. You don't keep score." Fast forward to our engagement party, hosted at Emma's parents' place. It was supposed to be a happy night, celebrating the start of a new chapter. Emma's parents had gone all out, decorating their backyard with string lights, hiring a caterer, and inviting just about everyone we knew. My family was there, her family was there, even some old friends from high school. It should have been perfect, but from the moment I walked in, I felt off. Maybe it was the weight of missing Mom, or maybe it was something about the way Emma's mom greeted me. Her smile a little too wide, her tone a little too forced. "Jake, you look so serious," she said, patting my arm. "Lighten up. Tonight's a celebration." I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was just being overly sensitive, letting grief cloud my judgment. I pasted on a smile and made my rounds, thanking people for coming and doing my best to be on. Emma seemed happy, laughing with her cousins and basking in the attention. After dinner, Emma's dad stood up to give a toast. I wasn't expecting much, just a few words about how happy they were for us and maybe a corny dad joke or two. Instead, he launched into what he called a light-hearted roast, starting with me. "Now, Jake, we're thrilled to have you in the family," he began, raising his glass. "But let's be honest, you're marrying up." Everyone laughed, and I chuckled too. It wasn't the most original joke, but it was harmless enough. Then he shifted gears. "And let's not forget Jake's late mother," he said, his tone just a bit too casual. "She was, well, let's just say she had a way of making her presence known." I froze, my smile faltering. Emma's dad grinned, clearly enjoying the attention. I mean, who else but Sharon would insist on giving advice about renovating a house she didn't even live in? Generous, sure, but maybe a little overbearing? The room erupted in awkward laughter. I looked around, hoping someone else would find this as wildly inappropriate as I did. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and my aunt shot me a look that said, "Are you hearing this?" Before I could even process what was happening, Emma chimed in. "Oh, come on, Dad," she said, giggling. Jake's mom wasn't overbearing. She was just very passionate. Her mom jumped in too. Passionate is one word for it. I mean, we all remember her showing up with landscaping plans and acting like we didn't already have a design in mind. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands clenched into fists under the table, and my heart pounded in my chest. They were talking about my mom, the woman who had co-signed their loan, who had babysat Emma's little brother without ever asking for anything in return, who wasn't even alive to defend herself. I glanced at Emma, hoping for some kind of sign. Maybe a look of regret or discomfort, something to show she wasn't okay with this. But she was smiling, clearly enjoying the attention. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I didn't say anything yet, but I knew. This wasn't just an offhand comment or a joke gone too far. This was a choice. A deliberate, cruel choice to mock the memory of someone who'd done nothing but give. And Emma wasn't stopping it. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to decide what to do. My mom's voice echoed in my head, calm and steady, the way she used to be when I was a kid and things felt overwhelming. "Jake," she'd say, "don't let people treat you, or anyone else, like they don't matter. Speak up when it counts." I took a deep breath and waited for my turn to speak. As soon as Emma's dad finished his toast, the room buzzed with awkward murmurs and uneasy laughter. People were glancing at each other, unsure if they should clap or pretend they hadn't just heard someone insult a dead woman in the middle of an engagement party. I sat frozen, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the table. My mind raced, a swirl of anger, disbelief, and sadness tightening in my chest like a vice. Emma looked at me, tilting her head slightly, as if she were expecting me to jump in and make it all okay. "You're quiet," she whispered, leaning toward me. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" The question bounced around in my head, almost laughable. Did she really not see it? Did she not hear the things her parents had just said? Or worse, did she think it was fine because it got a few chuckles from the room? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you, Mr. Roberts," I said, my voice steady but laced with a sharpness I couldn't hide. That was enlightening. The chatter in the room quieted down. Emma's dad, still holding his glass, gave me a bemused look. "Lighten up, Jake," he said with a chuckle. "It's just a joke." I forced a tight smile, though my jaw felt like it was made of stone. "A joke about my mom?" I asked, my voice calm but loud enough to carry across the room. "The woman who helped co-sign the loan for this house? Who babysat your son for free whenever you needed her? That mom?" A hush fell over the crowd. Emma's dad's confident smirk faltered, and Emma's mom fidgeted with her napkin. Emma looked like she wanted to sink into the floor, her face pale as she whispered, "Jake, stop." "Not here." But I wasn't stopping. Not this time. "Do you all think this is funny?" I asked, looking around the room, my voice rising slightly. "Mocking a woman who isn't here to defend herself? A woman who went out of her way to help you every chance she got? Because I don't." Emma's dad set his glass down with a loud clink. "Jake, I think you're overreacting," he said, his tone defensive now. "We were just teasing. Sharon had a strong personality. Everyone knows that. There's no need to make a scene." "A scene?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You mean like the scene you just made? The one where you turned my mom into a punchline at an engagement party?" The tension in the room was suffocating. My dad, who had been sitting quietly, cleared his throat, his face stern. My aunt crossed her arms and gave Emma's mom a glare that could have melted steel. On Emma's side, people looked everywhere but at me, their smiles awkward and strained. Emma grabbed my arm, tugging gently. "Jake, can we talk about this later?" she pleaded, her voice low and urgent. I pulled my arm free. "Later?" I said, turning to face her. "You didn't say later, when they started tearing my mom apart in front of everyone. You didn't stop them. You laughed with them." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "It was just, it got out of hand." Out of hand. Like her parents had accidentally spilled a drink instead of deliberately mocking the memory of someone I loved. The excuses sounded hollow, and I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. "Here's the thing, Emma," I said, my voice calm but firm. "If you can laugh at that, if you can sit there and let them say those things about my mom without standing up for her, what does that say about us? About what kind of partner you're going to be?" "Jake, please," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I shook my head. "No," I said. "What I'm doing is finally seeing things clearly." I turned to the room, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, but I think it's clear this isn't the celebration it's supposed to be. So, let me save you all the trouble. There's not going to be a wedding." Gasps echoed around the room. Emma's mom shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "Jake, don't be ridiculous. You can't just call off a wedding over a misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said firmly. "This is about respect. My mom gave you everything she could, and this is how you treat her memory? You've shown me exactly what kind of family you are, and I want no part of it." Emma's dad stepped forward, his face red with anger. "You're humiliating us in front of everyone," he snapped. "You humiliated yourselves," I shot back. "I'm just pointing it out." Emma burst into tears, reaching for my hand again, but I stepped back. "I'm sorry, Emma," I said quietly, "but this is over." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving the stunned silence and chaos behind me. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to calm the fire raging in my chest. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for certain. I'd made the right choice. I walked to my car, my hands shaking and my chest tight. The cool night air felt sharp against my face, but it didn't do much to cool the anger burning inside me. Behind me, the muffled sounds of the party continued. Raised voices, someone calling my name, the faint hum of a crowd trying to figure out what just happened. I didn't turn back. When I got into the car and slammed the door shut, the silence hit me like a wave. My heart was racing and my mind was spinning, replaying every word, every laugh, every smug expression from that room. Emma's dad, leaning into his jokes, Emma laughing along like it was nothing, and her mom piling on as if they hadn't already crossed every possible line. And Emma, the way she looked at me, not with regret or guilt, but with frustration, like I was the one ruining the evening. I gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead, trying to breathe through the rage and hurt twisting in my chest. A part of me couldn't believe what had just happened. How had it gotten so bad so fast? How had I not seen this side of them before? My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw Emma's name flashing on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the button, before I let it ring out. A few seconds later, the voicemail notification popped up. Then another text. And another. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the car, needing to get away from there, from them, from everything. The drive home was a blur. I barely registered the streets or the lights. My mind was too loud. My mom's face kept flashing in my head. Her warm smile, her laugh, the way she used to squeeze my shoulder when she knew I was struggling. She'd always been the first person I'd call when life felt overwhelming. But she wasn't here anymore, and the people I thought might step into that gap, Emma and her family, had shown me exactly who they were. By the time I got home, my anger had dulled into a heavy ache. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, staring at the dark TV screen. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty. I picked up my phone, which had been buzzing intermittently the whole ride back, and glanced at the screen. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, all from Emma. I opened one of the texts, the longest one, and skimmed it. Jake, I don't know why you're so upset. My dad was just joking. You know how he is. He didn't mean anything by it. Please call me so we can talk about this. I clenched my jaw, tossing the phone onto the couch beside me. Didn't mean anything by it. As if that excused the way they spoke about my mom. As if intent erased the hurt and disrespect they'd shown. The hours dragged on, and I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, her dad's smirk, her mom's condescending tone. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Should I have waited? Confronted them in private? But no matter how I looked at it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the jokes. This was about who they were. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. Within seconds, it lit up with a flood of notifications, mostly from Emma, a few from her parents, and even a couple from her cousins. I ignored all of them except one from my cousin Rachel, who'd been at the party. I'm so proud of you for standing up for Aunt Sharon, she wrote. What they said was disgusting, and you did the right thing. Call me if you need to talk. It was the first message that didn't make my chest tighten. I texted her back a quick thank you but didn't call. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone about it yet. By the afternoon, Emma's attempts to reach me had escalated. She sent a long email this time, laying out her version of what happened. She apologized for laughing at the jokes and said she hadn't realized how hurtful they were until I pointed it out. She promised to talk to her parents and make them apologize, too. But then the email took a turn. You overreacted, she wrote. I wish you'd pulled me aside instead of blowing up in front of everyone. Now my family feels humiliated, and I don't know how we're supposed to move past this. Please, let's just fix this together. I slammed my laptop shut, my stomach twisting. Even when she apologized, she couldn't help but shift the blame back to me, as if I was the problem, as if their behavior wasn't the root cause of everything that happened. That was when I knew for sure that there was no fixing this. No matter what she said, no matter what her parents did, I couldn't unsee who they were, or who Emma was. By the end of the day, I'd blocked her number. I needed space, and I needed to start moving on. Even if it hurt like hell, I knew this was the only way forward. The next few days were a mix of quiet and chaos. Quiet, because I refused to answer any calls or messages from Emma or her family. Chaos, because even with my phone on silent, the sheer volume of notifications was overwhelming. It was like they thought if they just kept pushing, I'd eventually cave and agree to talk. But I didn't. I couldn't. Emma's emails became more desperate. At first, they were all about apologies. "I'll make it right," she promised. My parents didn't mean any harm. But as the days passed and I didn't respond, the tone shifted. She started to blame me again, saying things like, "You're being unfair," or "We could have worked this out if you just talked to me." Her family was even worse. Emma's dad sent a series of emails dripping with condescension, accusing me of being too sensitive and suggesting I was letting my grief cloud my judgment. One message in particular stood out. "Sharon wouldn't have wanted you to act like this. She would have wanted you to forgive us and move forward." That was the first time in days I felt pure, blinding anger. How dare he bring my mom into this, twisting her memory to justify his actions. It was disgusting, and it made me more certain than ever that I'd made the right choice in walking away. But it wasn't all bad. My family rallied around me, reminding me that I wasn't alone. My cousin Rachel called one evening, just to check in. "I've been biting my tongue since you and Emma got engaged," she admitted. I always thought her family seemed off. I just didn't want to overstep. Hearing her say that felt strangely validating. I wasn't crazy for feeling like something was wrong. It had been there all along, hidden under the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. My dad came by the next night with takeout, his way of making sure I wasn't just sitting in my apartment wallowing. He didn't say much. He wasn't the kind of guy to give big, emotional speeches, but as we sat there eating in comfortable silence, he reached over and gave my shoulder a squeeze. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, "for standing up for your mom, for yourself." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It was the first time since the engagement party that I felt like I could breathe a little easier. But of course, the calm didn't last. A few days later, Emma showed up at my apartment. I didn't see her coming. I'd stopped looking at the peephole every time someone knocked. But when I opened the door, there she was, holding a box. "Jake," she said, her voice soft and tearful. "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, letting her in. She walked to the living room, setting the box down on the coffee table before turning to face me. "I brought these," she said, motioning to the box. "They're your mom's things. I wanted to keep them safe." I stared at her, the anger bubbling up before I could stop it. "You took my mom's things without asking?" Her face crumpled, and she shook her head quickly. "No, I didn't take them. I mean, I did, but I thought you'd want them somewhere safe, and I didn't know if you'd—" "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Just stop." The room felt unbearably tense as I opened the box and saw what was inside. Old photos, a necklace my mom used to wear, and a few cards she'd written to me over the years. My stomach twisted. These were deeply personal, things I hadn't even realized were missing. "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice low but firm. "You don't get to take my mom's memory and use it to fix your mistakes." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, I wasn't trying to use anything. I was trying to show you that I care. I've been trying to make this right." "You don't make it right by stealing my mom's things," I snapped. "You make it right by respecting her memory in the first place. And you didn't. You laughed, Emma. You laughed when your parents tore her down in front of everyone. And now you think a box of photos is supposed to fix that?" She started crying then, big, heaving sobs that might have broken my heart once. But now, they just felt manipulative. "I don't know what else to do," she said, her voice shaking. "I love you, Jake. Please, don't throw this away." I shook my head, the finality of it settling in my chest. "This isn't about love, Emma. It's about respect. You didn't respect me, and you didn't respect my mom. I can't marry someone who doesn't understand that." Her sobs turned into anger then, her voice sharp. "You're being impossible. One mistake, and you're throwing everything away? Do you even know how much I've been trying to fix this?" "One mistake?" I repeated, my voice cold. Emma, this isn't one mistake. This is who you are, who your family is, and I want no part of it. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She stared at me, her face a mix of anger and heartbreak, before grabbing her bag and storming out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the box on the table. The weight of everything hit me at once. What I'd lost, what I'd walked away from, and what I'd stood up for. And for the first time, I felt like I'd made peace with it. After Emma stormed out, the silence in my apartment was deafening. The box sat on the coffee table, its contents like a ghost of the life I thought I was building. I didn't open it again. I couldn't. Every time I glanced at it, I felt a mix of sadness and anger that I wasn't ready to face. Over the next few days, I threw myself into distractions, work, cleaning, anything to keep my mind off the weight of what had happened. My phone stayed on silent most of the time, though the calls and texts from Emma and her family had finally slowed. Maybe they'd realized I wasn't going to respond, or maybe they'd just given up. Either way, it was a relief. One evening, Rachel called again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Hey," she said softly. "I know you probably don't want to talk, but I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" I hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I'm okay, I guess. Just tired." She laughed lightly, a sound that felt almost out of place in the heaviness of everything. "That makes sense. You've been through a lot." We talked for a while, and for the first time, I found myself opening up about how angry I still was. Not just at Emma and her parents, but at myself. "I should have seen it, Ratch," I admitted. "I should have known who they were before it got this far." "Jake," she said firmly, "don't do that to yourself. You can't predict how people will act in situations like this. And honestly, most people don't show their true colors until they think they're untouchable." Her words stuck with me. She was right. Emma's family hadn't shown me this side of themselves before, not fully. Maybe there had been red flags I missed, but hindsight was always 20/20. What mattered now was what I did with the knowledge I had. A few days later, I finally decided to deal with the box. It felt like a heavy task, but I knew I couldn't just leave it sitting there forever. I opened it slowly, pulling out the photos and other keepsakes one by one. Each item brought back a wave of memories, some bittersweet, some comforting. The necklace caught my attention the most. It was simple, just a small silver pendant Mom used to wear almost every day. I held it in my hand, running my thumb over the smooth surface, and felt a pang of longing. She would have known what to say to me in this moment. She always did. I ended up taking the necklace and a few of the photos to her grave that weekend. It wasn't something I'd planned. It just felt like the right thing to do. I sat there for a long time, the cool breeze carrying the scent of fresh grass and damp earth. "Hey, Mom," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a while." I told her everything, about the engagement, the party, what Emma's family had said, and how it all unraveled. I even admitted the moments when I'd questioned myself, when I'd wondered if I'd been too harsh or impulsive. "But I think I did the right thing," I said finally, my voice steady. "I stood up for you. I couldn't let them get away with disrespecting everything you were. And I couldn't marry someone who thought that was okay." I don't know what I expected to feel in that moment. Closure, maybe, or relief. Instead, it was something quieter, a subtle easing of the weight I'd been carrying. It didn't fix everything, but it felt like the first step toward moving forward. When I got home, I found a final email from Emma waiting in my inbox. It was short, just a few sentences. She said she understood now that there was no fixing things between us and wished me well. She also apologized one last time, though it felt more like an afterthought than anything else. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw away the wedding plans, returned the deposits I could, and donated the decor we'd bought. Each step felt like shedding a layer of the past, clearing space for something new. Friends and family started inviting me out more, making sure I wasn't spending too much time alone. At first, it felt forced, like they were trying to distract me from my thoughts. But slowly, I started to enjoy it. I even started laughing again, little by little. One night, over drinks with a couple of close friends, I told them the whole story for the first time. They listened without interrupting, their expressions shifting from shock to anger to quiet understanding. When I finished, one of them raised his glass. "To Jake," he said, "for dodging the biggest bullet of all time." We all laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel hollow. I wasn't fully healed yet, and I didn't know when I would be. But sitting there with people who cared about me, who supported me without conditions or strings attached, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As the weeks turned into months, the intensity of what had happened started to fade. It wasn't that I forgot. It wasn't something I could ever forget. But the anger and hurt didn't sit as heavy in my chest anymore. Life moved forward, as it always does, and I found myself focusing on the things that mattered: my family, my friends, and finding a way to be okay with the changes that had upended my plans. Emma was gone from my life completely. After her final email, I didn't hear from her again, and I didn't go looking for her either. There were moments when her absence felt strange, like when I passed by the restaurant where we'd had our first date, or when I came across her favorite sweater she'd left behind. But those moments came less often as time went on, and I stopped flinching when I thought of her. One day, while organizing some old things, I came across the wedding binder we'd put together. It was full of ideas, pictures of venues, color palettes, seating charts we'd never fill. For a moment, I considered throwing it out with the rest of the clutter. But then I stopped, flipping through the pages one last time. It wasn't sadness I felt. It wasn't regret, either. It was something closer to gratitude, strangely enough. Gratitude that I'd seen what I needed to see before it was too late. Gratitude that I hadn't tied myself to someone who didn't respect me or the people I loved. I closed the binder and set it aside, deciding to donate it instead. Someone else might find it useful, and I was done holding on to things that no longer had a place in my life. Around that same time, I started going to therapy. It wasn't just about the engagement or Emma. It was about everything I'd been carrying since losing my mom. Grief is a strange thing, heavy and shapeless, and it has a way of creeping into corners you don't expect. Therapy helped me unpack some of that weight, to let go of the guilt I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to for not being able to protect her, even after she was gone. One afternoon, after a particularly hard session, I visited her grave again. This time, I brought fresh tulips, her favorite, and a small picture frame with one of my favorite photos of us together. I placed the flowers and the frame on the grass, sitting quietly for a while as the breeze ruffled the leaves around me. "I'm okay, Mom," I said eventually, my voice soft but steady. "I miss you, but I'm okay. I think you'd be proud of me." It wasn't closure, not exactly, but it was peace, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Life kept moving forward. I reconnected with old friends, started picking up hobbies I'd abandoned during my relationship, and focused on building a life I was proud of. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Not the person I was before Emma, but someone stronger, someone who had learned what he deserved and wasn't willing to settle for less. People started asking if I was dating again, and at first, the answer was a firm no. It wasn't that I was closed off to the idea, it just didn't feel like the right time. I wanted to make sure I was ready, that I wasn't carrying the baggage of my past into something new. Then one day, I met someone. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't dramatic. Just a chance meeting at a coffee shop when we reached for the same book on a shelf. Her name was Claire, and she had a laugh that made the whole room feel lighter. We started talking, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Hope for what could be. We've only been on a few dates so far, and I'm taking it slow. There's no rush, no need to force anything. But with every conversation, every shared laugh, I feel more and more like I'm heading in the right direction. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. Losing my mom, walking away from Emma and the life we'd planned. It was some of the hardest stuff I've ever faced. But it taught me something I didn't fully understand before. I deserve a life filled with love, respect, and people who value what really matters. My story isn't tied up with a perfect bow. It's still messy, still a work in progress. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like it's mine again. And that's more than enough.